These are the men who decided that they were not going to await their trials from the comfort of their homes. They could have. They could have posted bail and awaited their trials. But they knew that they were going to get more attention, more publicity, get their cause out a little bit better if they remained in jail. So they awaited their trials in the County Jail in downtown Cleveland for 83 days. Two of the men do face trials for breaking the fugitive slave law during this time. One of those men is Charles Langston. He is the older brother to John Mercer Langston. John Mercer Langston was Ohio's first black lawyer. He also was recruiting for the USCT, as I had mentioned yesterday. So Charles Langston faces trial. The judge is sympathetic, kind of like in the Lucy Bagley trial. Langston gives a very powerful speech during his sentencing, and so the judge gives him a reduced sentence. He still has to find him guilty, but he gives him a reduced sentence. It could have been 6 months in jail and that $1,000 fine, which again is about $40,000 in today's money. So he is given 20 days and a $200 fine, which the community helps kind of support him with. But he is the grandfather of Langston Hughes. So these men are very active in jail. They print one edition of a newspaper called The Rescuer in July of '59, and this is shortly before they are released from jail. They are released because they bring up charges against Anderson Jennings and the other slave catchers and marshals, citing that they do not have proper documentation to take John Price in line with the fugitive slave law. So therefore, they were in violation of Ohio's anti-kidnapping laws. That was one way that these northern free states could combat the fugitive slave laws, is they had to have that documentation or they were kidnapping. So because of the legal mess, everybody agrees to drop the charges and they go their separate ways. They're released in July of 1859. A few months later, this is a story that is like in the national newspapers. Oberlin starts getting some threats from the outside, and people who have affiliations with Oberlin try to hide those connections because they are traveling. They don't want to be assaulted elsewhere either. I mean, Oberlin's gained this national reputation. A few months later, the nation is rocked by a bigger news story, and that's John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. And so John Brown sent his son here, John Brown Jr., to go to the home of John Mercer Langston. Langston puts him in contact with a couple of African-American men from his community, Lewis Sheridan Leary and John A. Copeland. Those men agreed to go to Harper's Ferry. And the goal was to steal weapons from the federal government and then disperse them amongst the enslaved populace for this grassroots rebellion. The raid does not go accordingly, though. And instead, the men are trapped in the armory. It's surrounded by federal troops. Lewis Leary is killed by a gunshot wound at the raid. He is buried somewhere in the vicinity of Harper's Ferry. John A. Copeland, however, he said he never even fired a shot, but he was arrested along with all the other abolitionists that participated in the raid, including John Brown. They were then put on trial. There were a couple of African Americans that were part of these trials. They weren't tried for treason like the white abolitionists. Because of the color of their skin, they were not considered citizens of this country. They were tried for conspiracy, but their fate was the same. They faced execution. John Copeland, he was writing letters to his family from jail. Oberlin, when they hear that Leary and Copeland have gone to the raid, at first they try to distance themselves from these events. Again, they're already facing threats. But when they start reading Copeland's letters to his family sharing them with his community, that helps kind of rally them together. And when Copeland is executed, they martyrize these men. You see the obelisk down here. That was done in the 1860s. The plaque says 1860. We think it was actually 1865 that this was put up in the Westwood Cemetery. It was moved to this park later on. But that obelisk is dedicated to Leary and Copeland, and it is one of, if not the first, monuments erected in this nation to African Americans. So go ahead and take a couple pictures, but I want to get you back on the bus because we have to end today. You have to be back on the bus from lunch at 12:15. 12:15.